Well, a very big afternoon to you, or good morning to you, or good evening to you, wherever you are listening to our Coaching Cafe today. Perhaps you're streaming it on your favourite streaming service. My name is Natalie Ashdown from the Open Door Coaching Group. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the line, and also to welcome Open Door's expert coaches, Brigitte and Paula Jones-Hunt to the line today as well. Hello, ladies. How are you going?
Hello, everybody. Hello, Nat. Very well, thank you.
Hello, I'm super excited to be here with my favourite people.
Yeah, absolutely. And today we're going to be focusing on Ask Us Anything. And we put together this webinar for you because we were receiving a lot of questions off the back of What Makes a Great Coach, the book that's just been launched as we've been focusing on it. And there's lots of different questions that we get throughout our coaching programs that we thought we might cover today with you. So here we go. Before we begin, let me just acknowledge the traditional owners, the custodians on the lands on which we're all meeting today, their continuing connection to the land, the waters, the communities of Australia, and our international Indigenous folk as well that might be on the line. We pay respects to them, elders past, present, and emerging. So our agenda for today, if you are new to the Coaching Cafe, welcome. We are all about creating a community. We're about sharing learned experiences, having thought-provoking conversations. We come together at this time every Friday. And if you are also looking for CCUs, they'll be available at the end of the session. We've been focusing on what makes a great coach, the top 10 practices of the world's best coaches over the last few weeks, actually, sharing stories, researches, and questions. But today, we're really focusing on those questions that come out that we're asked very regularly, actually, in our coaching programs. And so we're very keen that you ask us anything in relation to the coaching practices or perhaps experiences you have in the workplace where managers or people that you're coaching might ask particular questions. And let's have a bit of a discussion today together in this short time that we've got together, and we can take a look at those questions and bring the expert panel in for some answers as well. So you can feel free to pop a message into the chat box with us, interact as you will, give us your opinions and your comments as we go along. So with that in mind, I'm going to just turn off the share so that you will just focus on ourselves. And I want to throw out the first question to yourself, Paula, and to you, Brigitte. And we want to kind of keep this informal and casual. But let's see what other questions people on the line might have as well. But one of the questions I find that people ask in the coaching programs is, so new coaches that are learning to coach or managers that are learning to coach, they're going to say, what if I know the answer? Can't I just tell them what I think? What are you thinking there in terms of the practices and your response to that?
Well, for me, I think it's got to be about practicing curiosity. I think as a coach, it's really important to go into our conversations with a genuine curiosity, because we don't know the answer for that person necessarily. We might know an answer. It might be a great answer, but it may not necessarily be the answer. So if we go in to these conversations with a growth mindset that suggests that I believe you can, essentially means that I know that you can find the answer, even if you think that you don't know the answer yourself. But it's really encouraging that person to become an independent thinker for themselves. So curiosity.
Yeah, I agree with you. Paula, what are you thinking on that topic as well?
Yeah, I think it sits in the listening space too, because it's about listening to the silence and being okay with the silence whilst the person finds the answer. And look, if you'd met me before I did the coaching course, I was the best answerer of people's questions and teller of them what they should do that you'd ever met. Excellent at it, in fact. But the key thing you get when you're listening and you're waiting for the answer is their answer. And it's hard to accept that you don't have the best answer for everybody, but the results you get when you wait and you listen and you let that person answer that question, it's actually a really beautiful moment when it comes to them and then they own it and accept it. So it's hard, and you might absolutely have really great answers, but it's not theirs.
And I think
it's really so go on, Bridge. Yeah.
to it, just about those dormant muscles in your head. You know, if you're always providing the answer to that person, those, you know, neural pathways and muscles are just dormant, you know, because people are expecting the answer. But get people to start thinking for themselves, and they start to activate, you know, pathways in their mind that that mean that they start to think, stretch their thinking and think about options for themselves, which of course builds, you know, so many more things in terms of their own confidence, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my addition. Sorry, Nat, go on.
No, I really agree with you. And we get a bit of pushback on that though. And it's like, oh, but it takes so long. Like it takes them so long to come up with the answer. Can't we just tell them, like we don't have time to sit around and just wait for people to come up with the answer. And that's where I really encourage that curiosity, as we've both talked about. And the listening, it doesn't actually take a long time just to sit back and pause for a little bit, ask a really good question, think about how can I be curious about this, like what they might be able to bring out. Because we know if people come up with the answers themselves, they're more likely to take responsibility, be accountable, you know, as we've mentioned as well. And it also leads me to my next question, I think, and because we get pushback around options as well. And so someone might be generating their own answers, but the question I got asked was, well, what if the options they're suggesting is unrealistic? So what kind of practice do you think we might kick in there? What are you thinking?
I think, look, I think as a coach, we need to be non-judgmental. So the first thing I think is, how do we know? How do we know that it's unrealistic? So where's the evidence? What conversation can you have to demonstrate that it's unrealistic? But I think it's important to throw the question out to that person to figure that out for themselves, whether it's unrealistic or not. So making those judgments immediately, I think it's good to stay out of that space and perhaps ask some challenging questions, or some questions that's going to allow that person to think outside the box and think about, how am I going to achieve this? And in terms of it being realistic, how do I know? That's my thought on that comment.
Yeah, who are you? Like how do you know it's unrealistic? But then people say, well, because the organizational parameters, the budget, et cetera, et cetera. So then I like the curiosity side of it to kick in there and go, well, how can we make it work? How can we make it happen, given the parameters, given the organizational constraints we've got? So there is a bit of, well, that might not be possible, but how could we make that possible? Or how can we work within the organization's parameters, the guidelines, the budget restrictions to make it come true or come to fruition?
Exactly. What can you do within your own guidelines?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to add a who in there as well. So who might you need to talk to in order for this to happen? You know, so for example, if someone comes up with something that is, I mean, I sit in that HR space, so sometimes options people come up with are something you might not be able to do. But the question is, so if you were to do that, who would you need to speak to in order to make that work? I'm not saying it won't work, but I'm saying you might have to go and talk to someone about it. But it helps them to lead them down that path, rather than saying, what you've said is wrong, come up with a different option, because that's going to shut them down. But who or what might we need to refer to before we make the final decision on this?
Yeah, I'm thinking of adding to that too, Paula, because what if they're deciding to do is dangerous, or you know, against organizational policies and procedures? So perhaps rather than, I mean, you might have to flatly tell them that's dangerous, that's against organizational policies and procedures, that will get you sacked. But the other question I'm thinking is around what impact, or who would that impact, or what's the impact of that decision? So getting them to think a little bit more about, well, if you took that course of action, what might actually be the impact, is a really good question as well.
And George has added in here, I'll ask a question around, what about if they ask you for their help and what you think, depending on our experience, can we then share with a mentoring or consulting hat?
It's a really good question, actually. If I can jump in here to kick this conversation off, and thanks everyone for jumping in onto the chat and putting your questions in there as well. That's a very interesting one. I was coaching a client just last week, and she was looking at a a change of job. So a big new opportunity, leave the company, take this new job, or stay in her current role with the flexibility, etc., that she had in the current role. And she did say to me, Nat, what do you think? And instantly I thought, it's not up to me, actually. It's not my decision. It's not up to me. It's about me kind of helping you unravel your thinking on this, and let you come to the decision that's best for you. And it really occurred to me that that person, this executive lady, had a lot of input from a lot of different people, a lot of people giving them their advice and telling her what they think she should do, including her partner and others around her, mentors, past bosses, you know. So everyone was actually expressing what they think. But I took the position of, it's not up to me to tell you what I think you should do. It's about me trying to unravel that. So that's one perspective on it. But have you got other perspectives, do you think?
I always think it's great to go in with a coaching approach first, because I think we can coach more often than what we tend to. We can default into mentoring or consulting quite easily because it comes naturally to a certain extent. It's what we're used to. So putting on the coaching hat and staying out of the space and refraining from the mentoring and the consulting to support that person to find their own answers, I think is really important. And it doesn't mean that mentoring is not important or consulting is not important. They are, and there is a place for them. I just think we can offer coaching first as an opportunity for people to think for themselves.
I think when you're working in-house, so for lots of my career it was in-house HR, you would start with a coaching conversation, and then there are some areas that you just technically know more about for some things. But in saying that, I still think even when you head into that consulting space or the expertise space, there's still not only one answer for everything. So it's about making sure it's broad enough so that the person has options in what's available, so you can start exploring which of these sounds best for you, and let's talk about how you might like to do that. I mean, sometimes in law there is a right and a wrong, but generally the how you go about implementing it is quite broad. So I think you start with the coaching. If there are some areas that you need, that your expertise is important for, then pop it in, but don't give it a one answer or you can only go this way. Give it some broadness so that there are options, and then throw in so which option that sounds best for you? How would you like to approach this?
Yeah, I really agree with you both. And it makes me laugh, Bridget, when we got that. So in our Certificate for and Workplace and Business Coaching program, people submit coaching demonstrations to be signed off for their ICF credential. And I remember that recording, Bridget, if you remember it, they were right in the middle of coaching, doing beautiful coaching. And all of a sudden the person said, I think I'll just take my coaching hat off now and start mentoring you. And we're like, no, now's not the time. Like, stick to what you were doing. It was going really great. So I think there's something about our need to jump in there and solve the problem as well. Even if we have that mentoring, that experience, there's a need to jump in to add value, to solve the problem, when actually what you're doing is really nice coaching and working for the person.
And I think to add to that, it's important to understand what actually is our definition of help, right? So if we go thinking, oh, I've got the answer for you, I really want to help you, so therefore I'll, give you my advice or tell you what I think. I think with coaching we need to change our definition of what help is. So what I want for you is to become an independent thinker. What I want for you is to be able to stretch your thinking and, come up with some really creative solutions or find the answer for yourself, so that is more fulfilling, and it's, builds your confidence and all of those sorts of things that coaching and having a coaching conversation will offer subliminally, simply through asking the question.
And of course, it does depend, doesn't it? And I know there's amazing coaches on the line who are also, brilliant mentors with their wealth of knowledge and of experience. So, if the person is completely out of options, they really don't know, then we're not just going to ask them, what do you think? What do you think? Because that would just be completely annoying and frustrating for the person. So there's a time to, we're not saying no to jumping in with consulting and mentoring, but there's a time and place for it, I think, is the other way of thinking about it.
Definitely. Yeah.
So the other question we got asked during the week was around, yeah, thank you, it's a nice love hearts. I love those love hearts floating up the screen there. The other question we got asked during the week is around decision making. So it came out of our webinar we did on the practice of decision making and how can we help coachees make the best decisions for themselves. So that was a really good question, I think, because linked to what we're just talking about, it's easy for us to suggest what we think might be the right thing to do here. So what are your thoughts on helping coachees making the best decisions for themselves?
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, it's really the essence of what the coaching conversation is all about. You know, when we're asking our who, what, where, when, how, when we're using those, you know, question prompters, question starters, we're really allowing that person to think sort of from all sort of different angles. You know, here's the box, but we're going to sort of start looking, you know, around that space to start generating so many ideas that potentially that person has the options to be able to make a decision, you know. And, you know, if something works, great. If something doesn't, what else can I do? How else can I approach it? So it's through our questions and staying out of the space that's actually supporting that decision-making process, I think.
Yeah, I remember working with a senior finance executive one day around, she had a staff member. The question is, they're in their probationary period. Do I keep them? Do I not keep them? And there were lots of different varying factors in here, and it's obviously not something we obviously take that sort of a conversation very seriously. And I remember at one point standing at a whiteboard, putting up all the information that she had been presenting and was talking about and asking, you know, and what would that mean and what impact would that have, and how, you know, and honestly, it came down to confidence. I wanted that senior executive to be able to walk into the meeting with the CEO and be confident that the decision they had made was the perfect decision for them, having taken into account everything. And so that should they be asked about that question, they had all the knowledge because they'd already been through it for themselves. So for me, that decision, the coaching part is critical in that decision making, because it just asks people to expand the current thinking and build on what else do you know? How else could this play out? What does this look like? What impact does that have? So I think in that decision making piece, coaching is one of those really critical tools for it.
Certainly.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying there, Paula, and everything you've offered as well, Bridget, all those coaching questions. If I'm listening back to this recording, I'm that kind of coaching nerd. I stop the recording and I start writing down the questions you actually ask, because they are the actual questions we'd ask in this situation. And I love that idea about unraveling. So what you're talking about there, Paula, is unraveling the decision, like pulling it apart, trying to understand. For me, it's about trying to understand what's most important. So coming back to also those critical questions around what's most important, what are the guiding values or guiding principles that you're actually going to bring to this decision. And I go back to my executive lady who, when all this fog around the decision with the new role, stay, go, etc., it really came back to what's most important, and her family and having flexibility were the two most important things. So now that you understand that, how does that shape your decision? How does that shape how you want to move forward? And they're really nice questions that we can ask. The other couple of questions I throw in here too that I've been playing around with recently is around, what do you want to get out of this conversation in relation to that decision? Because as coaches, the outcome might be to explore or to have more options, like you're talking about, Paula. Quite often, rookie coaches go in and go, right, so at the end of this conversation, you want to make a decision. That might not actually be the goal or the outcome. So we want to be clear about what is the goal, what's the outcome, what do you actually want to get out of this conversation in relation to that decision. Now, interestingly, when I asked my coachee, that question. She said, I just want to get, like you suggested, Paula, more understanding, more clarity. I want to try to get a better handle on this decision. She didn't say at the end of this session, I want to make a decision. So it's just getting very clear about what the goal is here as well.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. They're just really establishing that coaching agreement for the conversation that you're having.
Yeah, exactly. ICF core principle, establishing the coaching agreement as well. Yeah. Well, look, we've got time, I think. Let's just double check the chat if anyone else has got questions that they're throwing in there. And while we do that, I think we've got time for a couple more. The idea about people not feeling motivated at the moment. You know, we're coming to the end of year. We've had lockdowns. We've had working from home. We've had a lot of change going on in organizations. There's this feeling of change fatigue, screen fatigue. People are working from home, lots of things going on. I'm thinking about the practices, and I'm thinking about, you know, people that might not be as motivated. There's a few things that come up for me, but what are you thinking about in terms of, you know, my team's not motivated or they don't seem energized at the moment? Any thoughts about that?
I think practicing the practice of passion and even energy, I think is really for lack of motivation or understanding that feeling of lethargy and what have you. How do we turn that around so that we're feeling more passionate and feeling more energized in what we're doing? And I think essentially allowing people to really understand what their strengths are, so that they're able to focus on those strengths and bring that to what they're doing, helps to build on that passion and release that lack of motivation and lethargy that people might be feeling. So what do I need to do to be able to express my passion and my energy for something? You know, what strengths do I have that I can call upon and bring to whatever activity that I'm doing? Or how can I move away from the activity and do something else that's going to re-energize me? I think those sorts of things are really important to bring us back into focus.
Yeah, again, great coaching questions. I'm also thinking while you were talking there, Bridget, empathy, because you know, being empathetic for what people have potentially been through this year, but not just this year, over the last couple of years. So at the same time, being empathetic, trying to bring out those passions, those strengths. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So in one way, it's helping people to reframe their thinking, but also to find out, you know, what's actually going on for that person as well. So there's a few things going on there to be able to support people in practicing passion and energy and letting go of that feeling of lethargy or, you know, it's
Yeah. There's a question that's come into here about what if, so just as it's a similar kind of question. What if high school students don't like to be asked to think of their answers? Any tips on how to engage and disengage? So I can tell you, Tuan, thank you for sharing. It's not just high school students that don't like to be, that don't like to have the questions come at them. They're like, just give me the answer. I don't need your coaching. But there's that idea about the engagement and the disengagement as well. So again, linked back to finding their passion, allowing people the space to think, those kind of things. Paula, did you want to jump in on that one as well?
Yeah, I also think it's for lots of people, quite often people don't like being asked those questions. There's a reason that they're hesitant to do it. I like to start with a space where you talk about the reason you're asking the questions. I genuinely am interested in what you're thinking and feeling, and I'm here to support you through this. So in order to do that, I need to know more. So I think sometimes it's about creating that space for them to walk into and know that it's not a loaded question, because often teenagers, if you're asked, they think they're being asked a question because they're in trouble, because there's an issue. What we want to do is flip that and say, I want to ask you these questions because I'm genuinely interested. I've got great curiosity about what you're thinking and feeling.
And I think, you know, in terms of disengagement, I think to get rid of disengagement, we need to have connection. So to be able to connect with somebody or connect with a high school student because they're feeling disengaged, we need to spend some time building that rapport and connecting with that person as well. So they start to understand that, yes, actually what I do have to say is important. And I know that because this person's really interested in what I have to say, as Paula said. So it's about taking some time to chip away and build on that connection, so that these students start to get the idea that, oh, maybe what I do have to say is important. Maybe I can offer something. That can take a bit of time to do that. But I think if you chip away at doing that, I think eventually they start to engage and connect and understand that what they do have to say is important.
And I think that not being judgmental. So if what comes out of their mouth, if the first reaction you have is of contempt or like whatever it is that's on your face, fear, it's about making sure that you're not showing that, and that you're not jumping on whatever they've said and making them feel like what they've said isn't right. So it's about that supportive piece that happens after they do open up, because otherwise if you jump on them, they're never going to answer a question again.
Yeah, I'm just smiling. I'm just listening to you and going, yep, I can definitely relate to everything that you're asking there and all the questions that you're asking as well. It's really great. And as I mentioned, it's not just students, it's people that we're trying to coach in the workplace as well. So again, it comes back to all those who, what, how, when, where questions you asked as well, to expand those options. If you don't like what they're saying. But I agree with you, Paula, not going what, coming across as shutting that down, because they do shut down very quickly, as we know. Great. Well, I can't believe it. We are right on time. So if you are interested in all of these questions, they're coming out of our Leader as Coach program. They're also coming out of our Certificate 4 in Workplace and Business Coaching programs and our diploma programs. We've got a lot of great programs coming up to finish off this year, but also into the new year. You can think about your professional development. And of course, a lot of these questions are featured in What Makes a Great Coach under each of the practices. So if you're interested in curiosity or belief or purpose or passion, listening, communication, as we've talked about today, there's some really great questions you can get out of What Makes a Great Coach. But personally, I would just re-listen to the recording and start writing them all down as we suggested. So on that happy note, we all wish you to, we say, enjoy your coaching. Paula and Brigitte, thank you so much for joining me as Open Doors expert panel. We did say actually that we've got between us 50 or 60 years of coaching between us. That's a bit of a worry, I think. No, it's a good thing. We're not old. It's a super good thing. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks for listening. And we look forward to catching up with you at our next Coaching Cafe. We'll say goodbye for now.
Thanks, Paula.
Thanks.